In this room are are 6 of the original Gates of Paradise Ghiberti panels. There are a total of 10. But anywhere from 2 to 4 are constantly in a state of restoration. This was the Joseph and Benjamin panel, and what was remarkable and apparently wowed Florentinians of the time was the round temple and its three-dimensional sense, created within a depth of less than maybe a fingernail's width. Now this entire set of panels was done in the later period of Ghiberti's life, and he had been taught by Donatello, the close friend of Brunelleschi, how to create this three-dimensional look. In other words, the use of perspective, linear perspective. So the arches define that. Notice that the figures in the front are in great detail and larger than the figures as you go back. Again, a question of perspective. Now the single point or vanishing point perspective, known to friends of mine, Bill Haynes, was rediscovered by Brunelleschi and mathematically defined for the use of other artists, and is most characteristically seen there in the architectural structures in the upper left-hand corner. Notice how the angle goes towards the center there, and the center probably being, if you could see with the camera, right about where this woman is with the package on her head, and she of course represents almost the center of interest in this panel. Now normally such panels told several stories at once. I don't know that much about this panel to know what those stories were, or even what this one in general was. But in the upper left-hand corner, right-hand corner, way in the background and therefore way in the distance, are perhaps traders with their camel, perhaps indicating, I don't know. Here an interesting panel section. A man embracing another while another is bent over in total supplication. Notice here the weathering, if you will, of the panels over the course of 4,000 years or 400 years, which is why they're constantly in a state of restoration. And these panels are protected by a gas mixture that precludes oxygen. Don't know what this panel is about, but we can gather some things from it. Notice down below on the right hand those men carrying heavy stones. Could they be chunks of gold or big gems? I don't know. And then off to the center left, men carrying what perhaps is a box filled with precious jewels, and some kind of leader being transported also right here. And then up above, or before, notice in the middle here what appear to be Muslim or Turkish tents, and then above maybe Greece, the buildings of Greece. But notice the column here to the middle of the frame that is toppled partially over. Perhaps Ghiberti's way of saying it had undergone the destruction by these Turks in this ever ongoing clash between Christian and Muslim. Notice the detail in this central figure's clothing, and also the words, letters above, GER on the left, ICO on the right. Could this man be carried by a chariot? This panel is entitled The Labors of Adam and Cain and Abel. And of course, assemblage of stories, certainly tilling the soil, perhaps as a shepherd. Here's certainly the shepherd of the sheep, Don't know what that little vignette is. But here's certainly a sacrifice to God. Both brothers making it apparently. But here, the first murder. I find it interesting in these panels that Ghiberti shows severed trees that have had limbs severed from them. Why was that of particular interest? And was the disc behind this figure symbolic of the disc found in medieval art behind the head of any important saint or Jesus himself? This panel is, of course, doubly famous because it is the story of Abraham. It was the same theme that Ghiberti and Brunelleschi designed their individual panels in their competition for the first set of doors that Ghiberti ultimately created. And the significant part, of course, up here where Abraham is about to sacrifice his son in a display of obeisance to God, an angel appears here forcefully, as Brunelleschi did in his original competition panel, stops that slaughter. And instead the sheep here is killed and sacrificed and burned. Not sure what this panel reflects, or whether it's Abraham appealing to some angels to kind of let me off the hook. And who is the woman? Certainly if I knew the religious stories better, I could answer those questions. And here, of course, two men talking. You can see the animation of the discussion, particularly if you know Italians at all. What's also interesting is the perspective we have of this cow. Notice, were I knowledgeable enough, I could decipher the writing that is along that band there and at the top also. This panel is of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, obviously in the center, but it is a supreme example of perspective, the use of perspective. Notice the arches in particular, and let's get closer. How they appear to go back into infinity, but in fact, if you were to follow this one line right here, you would find the center point, and also take that line there, you would find the center point, or single perspective, single point perspective. Ultimately focusing probably right at the center of these two personages, the Queen on the left, Solomon on the right. And one wonders what this is here. Men that look like they're in some, or women perhaps in some little box. But notice the bird over here. Is it a falcon or is it a dove? Dove would indicate God's presence and the movement of, let's say, the spark from God down into the scene. On the other hand, it could simply be a falcon that represents something else. And what of these two people at the top? Almost throwaway figures, but do they symbolize something? Who knows? Pan through some interesting detail. Notice here another bird, no doubt a hawk it looks like. A dog with a collar. Here another hawk. Perhaps indicating, I don't know, the Europeans' penchant for hunting with falcons. But over here, other individuals dressed in togas, one would think alluding to the Queen of Sheba, and there a monkey on top of the heads of two people. And here it looks like men in Roman toga, or men in Roman military garb, and those that would be Muslims or Eastern peoples in their shawls or whatever you call them. Did that indicate some kind of meshing also of these two cultures? This panel is entitled The Story of Moses. Certainly Moses on the mount at the top, taking the 10 Commandments from the angels or from God. The two plaques, if you will. But what's going on here, I'm not sure. It looks as though this man is threatening this man. That these people are raising their hands in adoration. But it looks like this person is shielding himself from some kind of terror. Does the water reflect the early days of Moses? Are these scratched lines the abusive graffiti of prior ages? Or notice the palm tree. Is this symbolizing that Romans should beware of the power of this god? These Roman statues, one of the distinctions between Rome art and the Renaissance was that Rome in art and Greek art idealized the human body so that it was a body of perfection. Faces were beautiful, as with this man. Or this woman. But in a few minutes we'll see Renaissance sculpture, particularly by Donatello, that rebels against that and seeks out a realism almost to the point of, as it's alleged for Donatello, ugly could be beautiful. What I would think of as the Richard Boone theory.